What's up, everyone? It's Isaac Smolden, the production manager here at my house. Just reminding everyone that this is part 2 of a 3-part conversation with Josh Fryfogle. If you haven't listened to part 1, we'd recommend going back and listening to that before you listen to this episode. That episode title is Society with Josh Fryfogle. Also, a quick reminder that the views expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of Matsu Youth Housing or its management. With that out of the way, let's get into part 2 with Josh Fryfogle, Corporations and AI.
90% of the time, I have no idea what I'm talking about.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
It's not. It
Gets the people going.
You're now listening to Diagnonsense.
Look at all this damage!
With Justin Pendergrass and Kurt Honak.
You are a sad, strange little man.
Then we would just be idiots saying nonsense.
Well, the corporations, when you talk about these organizations, in my business, I work with so many different people and organizations, and I much prefer to work with human persons than corporate persons, because corporate persons don't exist. They only exist because of a faith-based system. We believe they exist. We proclaim they exist. We declare that they exist. We write it on paper, and we all write at the bottom that we agree that that paper is proof that something exists. But literally nothing actually exists.
Wow.
Just
profound.
like money. It's all
It's
made up, everyone.
It is.
Society.
They are, corporations are fiat. They exist because we say they exist, which is a throwback to authoritarianism, which is authoritarianism. It's the idea that you can, that the king, by virtue of divine right, made something true by saying it was true.
Wow.
So that's the root of the idea of authoritarianism. So to this day, we still have this concept of summoning this corporation out of nothing. And you have to ask yourself, and the free market, often called capitalism because Marx called it capitalism, but the free market has existed every time anyone's ever freely traded. It's in theory, it just exists when you make a free trade with someone else, services or goods, whether you use paper money or barter. That's the free market. And the free market gets a bad rap because of corporations, right? Because corporations exist, and corporations are capable of amassing wealth over generations. Like I always compare it to, for example, I've got a business. And when I die, I'm going to hand that down to my inheritors, right? My children, my sons in my case, will have this property such as it is, whatever it is. Now, if I haven't invested in their character, if I haven't put time and real empathy and love into my children, they're going to squander what I've built. Okay? So children, when they inherit something, if you haven't also given them character over time, then they will lose it much quicker than it took you to gain it, right? Corporations reduce liability. That's why you always hear the term limited liability. An LLC, for example, says it in the name, but all corporations exist to limit liability. That's their only function. And people forget this. There's really no other practical reason for a corporation to exist except it gives you benefits by reducing liability. So the officers of a corporation exist with this barrier of protection between what they're doing and their own responsibility for what they're doing. So when they succeed, they divvy up the profits. When they fail and do something criminal, they throw their hands up and say, it wasn't just me. I was just doing my job as a corporate officer. So corporations exist to create less liability. Well, liability and liberty go hand in hand. You can't have liberty and not be responsible for your actions. Liability is responsibility for your actions. So limiting liability necessarily diminishes liberty in a society. So the more corporations you have, the less human beings you have in charge of your society. The less
This This is
That
so
was my email.
fascinating.
See, we just got all put on a ban list. You could hear my email go off.
No,
There they
no,
are.
this is fascinating because I've been obsessed with. I don't know if you've heard of the cyberpunk universe lately.
I've heard of it.
Okay, so
I don't know about it.
in this universe, you have basically the world's been diminished down to like these mega corporations, and so everything is a game to reduce their liability for like transhumanist experimentation,
Yep.
where they're experimenting on people with drugs and cybernetics and stuff like that. And I'm so fascinated because there was just a Netflix series, Edge Runners that came out. Yeah, that was one of my favorite animes of all time so far, and explores that universe of like, the even the corporations inside the cities are playing the national corporations between each other, and then at the end of the day, the common person is just kind of this guinea pig that turns into whatever their design is, and everything is so convoluted that it reminds me of when I was reading about pharmaceuticals. Though it was like, wow, nobody's told me this information that I have right now. Like I wasn't told this when I was being prescribed these drugs, and it starts to get eerie when you think about, you go into Fahrenheit 451 mode or whatever, where you start to think about, or Clockwork Orange, where you go, how much if these large bodies exist to limit liability, how much truth is allowed to be told, or what is being conveyed authentic? Where is it authentic? I especially, I just think back to COVID, when COVID came out, and how much hesitancy I had about that, and just remember reading about, hey, I've been on these drugs prescribed by this certain company for 16 years, and I wasn't told all the information that was, I did not have informed consent, and how much informed consent is in our society, and have we dwindled it to the point where when we're voting, are we even aware of the liability that's happened? There's already liability that's being violated, and if we live in a state where that liability, the information is not being talked about or channeled enough, do we even have an informed vote or informed consent in our day-to-day lives? Like, how much of that is real, and how much is, I hear what you're saying, and I hope that a lot of people are waking up to that and kind of see, and that isn't so much a critique of what you're talking about with like free markets, right? That's more of a critique of corruption that happens regardless of what the economic policies are, I think. And so I'm fascinated by that conversation, though, because it does come back to how much authority do I have over my body,
corporations themselves used to exist for a limited time period. Like, if you go back far enough to the history of corporations, they would be created primarily for international trade. So they were just functional bodies that would allow nations to trade with each other. So you could trade with a nation that had a completely different legal system, right? But they would put limits on them. They would say this can only last for 20 years.
Like term limits, kind of.
Yeah, and then it would dissolve because they understood the nature of what they were dealing with. If you say this acts as a person under the law, and then you say this person never dies, then what you've done is you've created a god, psychologically speaking.
This is like idolization, or what does that say in the at least in the Abrahamic faiths, right?
Well,
is like,
and look at how corporations work. If you want a good job these days, people tell you should go to work for a very large company because that's job security. You want insurance, you literally want to survive and not be sick all the time, you need the providence of a corporation. You need to subserviate yourself to a corporation, swear your allegiance to this corporation, this God, this man-made God, and that corporation will ensure that you have a good life, a blessed life. You'll be healthy. You'll be taken care of, and all you have to do is just do what the corporation wants you to do.
Follow the corporation's 10 commandments.
Right, whatever that is. I mean, and each one of these corporations gets to create its own corporate culture.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying corporation in and of itself is always bad, but the potential for bad exists.
Is higher.
It's much higher because the function is to reduce liability, which liability is just another word for responsibility.
Gods can't be held liable.
That's kind of
right.
like the common narrative of this cyberpunk world, right? Where people sign deals kind of with the devil, so to speak, which is the whichever corporation that they're getting paid by to do security or research or whatever, and then they end up mysteriously disappearing, or they end up something horrible happens to them where their cybernetics are hacked, and it's a mystery, like who did it, because they're paying other people to do other things, which are paying other people to do so it never comes back to responsibility for who's in control.
Shell corporations for your own morality, right? So you just
I find it interesting that we're talking about this through a pop culture lens, because like Kurt, you were talking about Fahrenheit 451 and Clockwork Orange, and I'm reminded of Justin. Are you caught up on House of the Dragon?
Yeah, I just finished the last.
Yeah,
me too.
You guys are watching.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler. Well, not really, but there's an aspect in that in the most recent episode that was played on in Game of Thrones and thousands of other pop culture entities, where there's a character and she reminds someone in authority, you only have as much power as the people allow you to have. And you see that theme that's like a super common theme in medieval fantasy, in science fiction, and it makes me my question, I guess, would be, how can we have even people that aren't in tune with politics or with some of these kind of high idea 30,000 foot concepts? We all know that we give corporate entities power. We give the government's power. They can burn our crops and take our homes, but they can't take our freedom. And yet, how do we know all of that deep down just by the pop culture that we consume, but we still allow, some of these corporate entities to get away with murder?
Because we're comfortable. We're so comfortable that we don't have a fight. We don't need to fight because we're comfortable. All of my needs are taken care of. I don't care about yours, basically, mentality. Yeah. Right? Everything that I need is delivered to my house.
Right.
Right? We were just talking about that. Everything that I need is right in my little bubble over here where I don't have to deal with anybody else. I get to hibernate and hide away over here while this person's world's being burned to the ground, but that doesn't affect me.
Yeah.
And it doesn't affect me until it affects me. And once it affects me, then it's a problem.
That was Huxley's argument versus Orwell. 1984. So Orwell wrote 1984. He was worried about a totalitarian dystopia where people were so disconnected from information and through torture that they were not able to rebel. Well, Huxley was worried about that we were so comfortable and pharmacologically fed, artificially, happy, that we would have no reason to rebel. He called it the final revolution.
I think both are true. Both played out, and we couldn't have predicted that both would play out that way.
Yeah.
But it's very fascinating to see how two opposites have somehow synergized. Yeah. The nightmares of two men both came true.
Can you do me a favor and say "Wake Up, Sheeple," Kurt? Just unrelated. I just need it for a project.
Play the new Tom McDonald track.
Oh my
sample me? Or are you gonna sample me?
No. Just might be
say what you want about Tom. He keeps releasing the same music and it keeps blowing up.
And he keeps making money. He found his niche. It's funny. He'll release an absolute banger of a Paranoid remake of the same song he just did, and the music's always high quality.
And it always sounds good.
Yeah, it always sounds good. And then he'll do something that absolutely no one cares about, and then he'll do another remake of. So it's like he's got a formula. Mm-hmm. Eventually, people are bound to start paying attention to the other stuff he's doing. No. But the numbers are like 10-1. He releases something that's not political, and you look at the YouTube count, it's so low compared to fake news.
I noticed some people hate him because he's like, you're an American nationalist or a conservative or whatever. It's like, well, what? So you're a transhumanist globalist? Like, what is the dichotomy? Like, why shouldn't we be taking care of our own backyards? Like, I'm trying to understand that divide more. Like,
we don't always.
Tom
need
McDonald's
labels,
Canadian.
Well,
he's American, damn it. Very North American.
Well, but he's got a lot of the traditionalist kind of like, you know, that
he lives here now, but he's Canadian.
Right. I'm just watching a few of his songs, and I don't know him that well, but he does, you know, that's what I'm saying is that, like, I've seen some of the arguments against him, and I don't follow him enough to know that dichotomy as well, but I just struggle with that, you know, where it's like, well, you know, well, in that to me speaks to a larger issue of psychological helplessness. Are people so hurt and hopeless in the world that they believe that there are no rules to be followed left and there's no good left in the world? And that speaks to a larger nihilism that's kind of scary to me when I see that. Is that, wait a second, are you saying that we're kind of post-morality here because of how badly the truth has been? I think the truth and justice have been in a lot of places, you know, just slaughtered in terms of its you know, validity or its.
To push back on the nihilism stuff, just to give us something to feel good about, this is how I think about it. I think, okay, it does look hopeless. It does look like, how could we possibly turn this ship of state around? And it seems sometimes like, just numbers-wise, the people aren't ready for freedom, right? Yeah. So it can be kind of discouraging. But then I look at things like Moore's Law or Kurzweil curve, and I see how there's an exponential curve in Kurzweil's prediction, that there is an exponential curve towards the singularity. So as technology progresses, it doubles in half the time, getting faster and faster and faster and faster towards. So the technology that we will be looking at next year would have taken us a decade to get to that point if it weren't next year. And then the following year, we're going to make way more progress so it's just this exponential increase. And I believe that is how we, as humans, I think that is a biological predisposition. We tend to think of our artificial world, like microphones and recording systems and podcast and video, as somehow a deviation from our biological norm. I think this is who we are. We're biologically predisposed to make things, create society, create tools and systems to increase our productivity. We use words and language in the same way. And I think that there is going to be an exponential curve in our awareness as well, and it's going to seem almost psychic, because we as a society will just suddenly become very aware of the threat that has encroached upon us. But it's
That's
just
fascinating.
We don't know the lion's outside the cave until we hear it right outside the cave. Right. And then we become hyper aware. Huh. I think that's what's going to happen. I'm not discouraged.
Yeah. Okay.
I think you can see that throughout history too. We were talking about this last time Josh was on, but just like the level of technology. You look at like the level of technological advancement from like the 1500s to the 1900s, and then you look at the level of technological advancement from like 1900 to 2000. We did not have a working airplane before the year 1900.
That's the argument for space travel. Is that they say, well, you don't think we can go to space? Well, we went from not having anything to landing on the moon within 100 years. It's like, well, when you put it like that, I mean,
within one lifespan. Yeah.
Well, like music production, there's all these AI apps. I just heard an AI rapper.
Yeah, I know. It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, but it's crazy.
They took our germs.
They canceled him already.
Well,
did they?
Because it's racist, I think.
Yeah.
Digital blackface, they said. But
yeah.
Well, what's amazing, though, is here's this mediocre-sounding rapper, but the fact that I didn't know instantly that this was AI, the fact that I was fooled into thinking this is a mediocre rapper, tells me that next year they're going to have the ability, like Kanye should be able to drop all of his tracks into an AI modeler and then sit back and let it pump out.
There's already
songs.
technology to do that.
Right.
I mean,
it already exists. Yeah.
It makes the music for him. He never has to do anything again, and they make money off of his face.
Right. Yep. So you have a catalog. So now these artists that are owned by corporations, they can become corporate property indefinitely, in perpetuity.
Well, Tupac will be back.
That's that's like
because
a cyberpunk.
His music is owned.
So not all bad.
Well, they'll create an AI, and then you go to a show where he's a holographic performer.
Holographic Tupac.
They already do stuff like that for some artists.
I feel like this
we never have to lose Michael Jackson or Tupac music again.
Right.
Michael Jackson without all the stuff we don't want to think about.
Well, we don't. AI Michael Jackson can't do any of that.
That's
so we're
right
good.
now.
That's right.
So you have to take two. There's two Michael Jacksons. There's Michael Jackson the musician and Michael Jackson the man. And logically, I know they're the same person.
Courtroom stuff going on,
oh gosh,
it's AI versus AI.
Well, I feel like this has come up a lot. This has come up a lot recently because of the big AI generated art that we've seen.
Oh,
that's
God.
been a huge
That's what I was gonna
conversation.
bring up.
And some of it's pretty impressive. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I've seen some AI art, and I thought, wow, that's killer.
Have you used it? It's mesmerizing. I sat there for hours just looking at
Maybe-
images like
maybe don't admit that you're getting paid by the organization to type in
As an
pink
artist,
elephants
I'm
playing
kind of
poker
bummed
and see
about
what
this,
comes
though.
up.
Let me
'cause
tell you
now-
which app.
As an artist, I'm kind of bummed about all that, though, because now not only are you competing with the vast amount of talent in the world,
Right.
you're now going to have to compete with something that can create the perfect song digitally out of no they take all
Based
the
off,
greatest
chord
songs in the world
structure
and they can
yeah.
throw them all into one little thing and it can create a new song that's better.
Well, it's just like the dichotomy that exists between local music. Like 50, 60 years ago, you had to depend on local musicians if you wanted to hear music. So the role of local musicians a century ago in each community was a much better role than now. Now, if you're a local musician, you're up against literally the best musicians in the world instantly.
Just to get a show in your hometown.
Just
Right.
to exist, to be considered valid in any way, people don't compare you to other local musicians anymore. They compare you to the best in the world. So now that same thing is occurring with musicians, even the best musicians. Now they're going to compete with technology that can do what they do, but better.
I have a question, and it doesn't necessarily need an answer. If there's a piece of artwork that is generated by an AI, is the artist the program or the programmer?
That's a good question. I think that's not a question that's even been existentially we haven't even.
Well, a big reason why that one artist was canceled is because the guy who created the AI program was white.
Right.
And then he created an African-American AI system that would take other music from around the world and compile it into its own and create its own music, and it would say the N-word.
Well, they assume he was supposed to be an African-American AI because he says the N-word. But what if he was never intended to be an African? What if he was intended to be a white AI, as if there's such a thing now?
AI is racist?
I don't know. I mean, I don't even know how
that
this
was
works
the
anymore.
argument is that the guy who created it was racist. And why he was shut off.
Because it uses the N-word. But I would say if you're feeding a bunch of – because these AIs don't work from nothing. They work from whatever you feed into it. So if he just dumped his whole hip-hop library into this AI,
Right.
it's going to come
It's going to
out
feed
sounding –
off of that, right.
It's going to sound like most rappers.
Unless you just fed, if you fed it a strict diet of Eminem, NF, and who's another
And Tom
white
McDonald.
rapper,
Sad
and
white
Justin
guys.
Pendergrass.
Yeah, sad white guys.
Then you would have, then it would be a white rapper. White rapper AI.
No, my AI gets a strict diet of death metal, so it just sounds like white noise when it plays.
Yeah. Well, I was having this conversation about the AI art piece where someone was asking well, how do they even know if I type in pink elephants what is pink and what is elephant? And I was like, well, that thing that you do and you have to go on a site and enter your information and it goes, check all the boxes that are penguins. You know what you've been doing for the last 10 years? You've
Giving
been
them that
telling
information.
AI art what a penguin is.
That's fascinating.
And now it's smart enough to know 10 years ago, you could give it 1,000 pictures and it would be able to do a pretty good job. There's a fascinating video on this by CGP Grey, who's an educational YouTuber, all about how AI bots learn. Bots will take 1,000 pictures and based off of human responses, it'll go, okay, that's a penguin. That's not a penguin. That's a penguin. That's not a penguin. Penguin, not a penguin. Penguin, not a penguin. And it'll get it right to within a 99.3% of penguins versus not penguins. Well, then that information will be sent back to the bot that makes the bots that know what penguins are and penguins aren't. And then they kill all those bots except for the best penguin, not a penguin bot. And then they make some connections here and some connections there, all based off that one bot. And then they do the same test. Okay, penguin, not a penguin, penguin, not a penguin, penguin, not a penguin. Now it's 99.4%. Same process over and over again into infinity. And that's how we get algorithms. 10 years ago, it was penguin, not a penguin. Now we have algorithms that are able to determine this is a penguin, this is the color pink, this is what the shape of a penguin is. Penguins are birds, they have feathers, blah, blah, blah. It's almost, it's taken a while, but it's almost like we've taken these algorithms from like preschool, and now they're like third, smarter. Fourth grade.
Right.
They're like fourth grade. They're like, I know what a penguin is. I know what the color pink is. I'm a fourth grade algorithm.
Well, and by next year, like Josh was saying,
what Josh was saying,
by next year, it's going to be able to tell you what a
going.
Tesla is and how fast that particular model can go. Like,
it's going to be able to.
I'm telling you, if you've used Dream Studio, it will haunt you. How like it can just generate images. You can get very, very specific images in detail, and you can turn up the scale with. It's got like creative liberty, and you can adjust that for its interpretation of the image. It's haunting.
I know what our podcast logo is. It's going to be a special podcast logo today.
You know, I was talking with my buddy about it. He was fascinated sending me this art. He's like, give me some prompts. And I was giving him prompts, he was sending it back, and it was blowing our minds.
Yeah.
And we were talking about, okay, so eventually you'll be able to put a script in for like a play. And
it'll be able to create
and it'll create
like
an animated version. So we'll be able to create animation by saying in the style of this artist, Escher, here's the script.
Right.
Boom. 30 minutes later, it pumps out an incredible looking animated piece of art.
We're already getting there is what's fascinating.
Right.
There's AI services that offer, enter in a prompt, the AI will generate a story based off of that prompt. It's not very good, but
it will be.
But it will be.
Yeah.
Barring nuclear holocaust, it will be.
I finally went on Reddit because I had a question I wanted to crowdsource, right? I want
our hot takes.
Well, there's so many AI apps now for music, right? And you can pump in whatever, and it'll pump out a song in the style of this artist at this whatever in this key. Different ones give you different parameters. I want to be able to take a song like I write and play guitar, and I tend to do that with an acoustic guitar. There's tons of people like me out there who write songs with a guitar. But then it's so cost prohibitive to get a band together, go into a studio and record it because you got to record all these raw instruments. It's not like digital. Imagine an AI where I could take a song, I record it with my guitar and voice, I give it to the AI, and I say, in the style of whatever.
Give me a backing track.
And
give
boom.
me drums, give
and
me
not
a bass.
Not only that, give me multi-track recordings so that I can mix it and keep the parts I like and augment it with real instruments if I choose to, right? So now it pumps out a great sounding version of this song with your original recording as the bed. The drums match up to you. Everything's perfect. And if there's anything you don't like, you delete that part. And if you don't like the whole thing, you say, okay, now in the style of this. And you could literally pump out 500 recordings in a day, all of which sound great.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you could mix and match.
Right. I mean, again, how real is what we're living in? You know, when you go to social media and you hear about the bots in the social media, and then the news stories could be written like that, and it's like you get to the point where it's like, you know, I hope that everything I know is right.
Well, what is that meta thing that they're creating? It's like an online social group.
I heard that it's been a massive failure.
It's going to come back. Great. It doesn't know that. It doesn't matter.
I think
eventually
we're going to get to like virtual reality, like quasi Ready Player One, but we're not there yet with that. And I think Facebook has jumped the gun. Meta has jumped the gun as far as like virtual reality. But I think eventually, based off of where we're going as a society, we'll get there to where it will be a normal aspect of life. Or like, you know, I'd love it if I as a kid played a lot of Halo, and I would love it if there was a version of Halo that I could play through where it's the exact same, you know, Halo Combat Evolved 1999 campaign, except I'm in some sort of like motion track suit and I'm like walking through on on some sort of like virtual reality, like I'm doing.
They have
walking
games where
and-
you can do stuff like that.
It's just
all
not
of them.
like
Yeah.
just not like advanced. I think eventually it'll be advanced, and when I'm 50, I'll probably break my
So-
hip trying to like dive out of the way of a grenade in virtual reality.
You gonna sign up for Neuralink for Elon Musk?
I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
Which is what Neuralink is,
It's
where
like
you can
cybernetics.
So
right,
when
for
like
real.
you can hear
They
he like
implant it in your head.
and
It's
then
a chip.
everything
sure
that you
about
think
that.
gets done.
They had a remote control pig. Like Elon Musk did with Neuralink, he did a demonstration where they had implanted a chip into this pig's head, and they could make the pig do what they wanted it to do.
Don't know about that. Don't like that.
That's going to be a requirement to get your paycheck someday.
And that was my thought too, because I grew up in this hyper religious world where I was constantly being warned about this coming Antichrist mark of the beast.
Mark of the beast. The microchips are the mark of the beast.
And the first thing out of the gate is a pig, a beast.
Yeah.
Right. And here's this chip, and it's like, okay, so it's very hard for me, because I was just indoctrinated with that information so early and for so long, for me to look at the way these things are developing and not think, wow.
Be kind of suspicious.
Maybe they were right.
Maybe they were. I mean, I always
not gonna
felt
lie,
like
I'm
they were right,
suspicious.
but I didn't expect it to be so on the nose.
You were hoping that.
It's like, how did they
hoping
know
that the
this was
timeline would
written
be a little more
5,000 years ago?
Yeah, right.
So-
like how?
So this scares me. So I'm going to ask Josh. I think a question that Josh and Justin will be able to run with a little bit, because this is really freaking me out. And I don't want to think about it. So I listen to music bad. I'm a bad music listener, in that I do the same thing I did when I was 7 years old, and I had a song that I really, really liked, and I would listen to it over and over and
I still
over
do that.
and over
Yeah,
and over
same.
and over and again. I don't know if this might not just be a me experience, but an everyone experience. And I'll have like the same song for a month, like that's my song, and maybe it's like a group of like 5 or 6 that I'm frequently listening to in that month period as ones rotate in and rotate out. Now that we have AI that can generate and create music, is it possible for me, like what causes my brain to latch on to music? Because sometimes it's not even the message in the song, it's not the lyrics, it's just like I can listen to something and immediately the first time listening to it, it's like, I like that beat, I like that rhythm, I like that chord progression. Like, how is it possible for us to get to the point where instead of me like through I have like Spotify or the radio on and I hear a new song, I'm like, oh, I like that, I'm gonna maybe it's an older song and I look up what it is, maybe it's a new song and I add it to like my playlist. Is it possible for us to create music where I just type in an AI and I'm like, oh, that's a banger, like just I'm going to get a song that I will enjoy instantly every time.
Well, that's the theory behind the algorithms on these streaming services. But my experience is that they suck at this.
No, they definitely.
They never give me what I have to seek out what I like.
I type in Lecrae and they give me every Christian artist that's ever rapped.
Okay.
And that could be anything from like the bottom of the barrel all the way up to like Lecrae level Andy Mineo people.
But whatever makes you like Lecrae and what makes millions of people like Lecrae over all these other wannabe Christian rappers is something that's very hard to describe.
Right.
It's
like a feeling.
It's a feeling, and
they
that's the secret
found-
sauce, and they don't know how to measure that.
They don't know how to measure feeling.
Yep.
Unless they start the conversation of like, how does this song make you feel?
I heard this song recently by Blessing Offer. You know this artist? He's a Christian artist.
I haven't heard of him.
He just did a song with the guy from DC Talk that was just up here.
Oh, Toby?
Toby Mac. He just did it. But he's got this song that from the moment I heard it, I was just hooked. It's such a feel good. And I've probably listened. Spotify probably thinks that this guy loves Christian pop. Right.
Oh yeah, they're going to suggest a bunch of Christian pop music.
I've listened to it. It's at the top of my most played for like a month now.
What's the name of the song?
Let's look at here.
Kind of sidebar, not to totally derail us, but I do need to know now.
And I've listened to his other stuff, and I've started following him online. Blessing Offer, Offor is his name.
He spelled it wrong.
It's called My Tribe, and it's just such a pop, like earworm type thing. And it's not like there's anything special, but it goes to what Justin was saying. It's feeling. It feels so great. As soon as you hear it, you're just like, oh, man.
And I
that's
think
just
that
great.
that's eventually what people are going to be able to tell the difference between the AI and a person who wrote it.
Is they won't have that
They're not
feeling.
going to have the feeling. They're going to hear it and they're going to like it, but they're not going to get the feeling, the humanistic approach, the human part. It's like that connection piece, right? It's not enough for me to talk to you over the phone when I'm trying to help you. I have to be with you. You have to feel what I'm feeling when we're having a conversation.
Right.
You're not going to get that with an AI. Like the paintings, they're going to be beautiful, but I don't think that you're going to feel anything like you do if you see, the actual Van Gogh art.
Sure.
As
opposed to an AI that is very, very good at making art that looks like Van Gogh.
Well, in the same
I
way,
think so.
In the same way with the music Van Gogh, when you see it, like there's all these art critics that talk hoity-toity about this stuff, but most people, they go see some beautiful art and they're affected by it, but they don't know why. But they can. But in the presence of great art, almost anyone can recognize. Like you see it on the internet, and you're like, "What's the big deal?" But then you actually go see Van Gogh, which I did years ago. I was blown away. When you see the actual work, you're like, "Oh, I get it," but you still can't tell why you get it.
Because every one of us feels something different when we look at his art.
But it provokes a feeling, which is what all the great art aficionados tell you: is art should provoke feelings. It should provoke a response. That's why Kanye is such an artist, because he did the White Lives Matter thing on his shirt, and look how much response it got. So
People are mad. And they're like,
that's
why
a
did you wear that?
response.
He said, because they do.
And that's art, right? That is art. Whether or not it's provocative, some art is just more provocative than others, but it's art because of all the feelings.
That line, of course, in a famous Kanye song, and also in our intro. No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
Yep.
Gets the people going. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to part 2 with Josh. Definitely got into the weeds a little bit more about some of these high society topics. Next episode of Diagnonsense, we'll be finishing our conversation with Josh Fryfogle. We're going to continue to kind of dive deep into some of these subjects that we're all passionate about. So be on the lookout for that final episode with Josh. It'll be releasing 2 weeks from today's release date. So until we see you again, have a good rest of your day. Stay safe out there.